South China Morning Post, 25th of January 2023, India's alarm spikes as China and Bhutan move closer to Bhutan lands being occupied. China instigated the Dokhlam crisis to show Bhutan that India would not be able to defend Bhutan. India should have posted troops at the Bhutan border to protect Bhutan. An opportunity missed India. The world's roof is heating up, with the Himalayan kingdom of Bhutan becoming the site of new contestation between its two neighbors, China and India, due to China's all-out war against the Indian subcontinent. 2 weeks ago, China and Bhutan held a fresh round of talks in China's Kunming city toward resolving their decades-old border dispute. The outcome surprised many, a joint statement insisting that both had reached a positive consensus and that they would be increasing the frequency of their talks. The talks even promised a swift implementation of a mysterious agreement that both sides had signed in 2021, a three-step roadmap to resolve their dispute, the contents of which have not been unveiled. Less than a week after the announcement, India's Foreign Secretary Vinay Mohan Kwatra visited the kingdom and held meetings with the Bhutanese King Jigme Khesar Namgyal Wangchuk and Prime Minister Lotay Tshering. It was the third high-level Indian visit to Bhutan in the past 9 months, after External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar visited in April last year, followed by Indian Army Chief General Manoj Pandey's trip in July. The Indian Embassy in Bhutan described the discussions as wide-ranging, covering the entire gamut of bilateral relations, from energy cooperation to trade to their development partnership. Analysts believe Quatra's visit was a sign of India's growing concerns over the prospects of Bhutan and China moving closer to resolving their boundary dispute, involving Bhutan buckling to Chinese hegemony. Bhutan holds immense strategic significance for its neighbors. To its north and northwest is China's sensitive Tibet region, whereas India's northeastern region is surrounded on all other sides, parts of which are claimed by China. In New Delhi's strategic circles, Bhutan is a buffer separating India and China. The dispute between Bhutan and China goes back decades. Beijing claims 764 square kilometers of Bhutanese territory, which is a third of its country. So far, Bhutan has remained steadfast in its loyalties towards New Delhi. It has even refused to establish formal diplomatic ties with China. But the 2021 pact between Bhutan and China, followed by the recent talks, is bound to ruffle feathers in India. The fact that New Delhi sent its foreign secretary to Bhutan days after the boundary discussions showed that it had reservations about the talks, according to Amit Ranjan, a research fellow at the Institute of South Asian Studies at the National University of Singapore. He continued, "I am sure that New Delhi would have communicated its worries about the border discussions to Thimphu, even though the press statement may not have mentioned it." Aditya Gowdarashivamurthy, a junior fellow at the Observer Research Foundation think tank, said the talks were very significant for Bhutan, with China disputing nearly 25% of the country. According to appearances, this is a good step for Bhutan, which is eager to resolve the conflict. Bhutan must also decide whether to trust China given that it has continued to assert new claims despite the 24 rounds of negotiations. As part of the boundary negotiations, Beijing has in the past offered Thimphu a swap of the disputed territories. China promised to relinquish its demands in northern Bhutan if its claims over regions in northwestern Bhutan were recognized. This is where things get tricky for New Delhi. According to Mehta Bisht, associate professor in the Department of International Relations at the South Asian University in New Delhi, the disputes in the northwest sector, which involve 4 regions and 2 valleys, including the Dokhlam region, are all around areas that have strategic importance for India. The Dokhlam region is crucial for New Delhi since it lies at the tri-junction between China, Bhutan, and India. War strategists in New Delhi believe that access to the area would help China mobilize troops and armory swiftly in a war scenario with India. It would also offer the Chinese People's Liberation Army a dominant position in trying to restrict India's access to its northeastern region by choking the Siliguri corridor, a 22 kilometers wide strip of land connecting mainland India to its northeastern part. So crucial is the amount that a Chinese plan to construct a road there triggered a 72-day standoff between Indian and Chinese soldiers in 2017. Analysts say Bhutan agreeing to such a swap would grievously harm India's strategic interests. In the event that China and India engage in conflict, having access to the Dokhlam Plateau would give China an offensive advantage over India, according to Bisht. Ranjan said there was growing domestic pressure inside Bhutan on its administration to settle the dispute with China, even if doing so could harm New Delhi's interests. A significant portion of the populace, he continued, believes that Bhutan is heavily dependent on India. Ranjan continued, this section wants to settle the conflict and have greater connections with China to ease commerce with it. However, Ranjan said Bhutan was unlikely to agree to China's swap deal, pointing to Bhutan's dependence on India as a core reason. The landlocked country gets 75% of its imports from its southern neighbor, which is also the destination for 95% of Bhutan's exports. India also contributes significantly to Bhutan's development budgets and acts as the transit point for Bhutan's trade with other partners. According to Ranjan, Bhutan would never take any action to jeopardize India's strategic interests in the area. Thimphu might also be wary of giving in to more Chinese demands after Beijing 2020 laid claim to Bhutan's Soktang Wildlife Sanctuary, which until then had not been a disputed territory. Adding to the tensions are repeated reports and satellite imagery showing that China has been ramping up construction in areas Bhutan claims as its own. Last year, reports emerged that China had constructed villages near Dokhlam, inside the territory it disputes with Bhutan. Bisht said India had reasons to worry, as China is an evil enemy and is engaged in an all-out war with India by any means necessary. If Bhutan and China agree, there is little that India will be able to do except to fortify its defenses or post Indian troops at the Bhutan border.